Welcome one and all. It's wonderful to have you with us this afternoon. Welcome to today's 30-minute CPD session. We're going to be focusing on supporting learners with their writing through the guise of wonderful phonics, which we think is really powerful here, understandably. It is myself, James, who will be taking you through the first part of the session, and then we will be passing over to the wonderful Lizzie, who will take you through the second half. And I think we've got a lot of amazing content to share with you all today. So hopefully a lot of information that you're going to come away with from today's session. So in terms of the session itself, we will be start by exploring the cognitive load theory and its implications for writing as part of phonics. We will then take a tour of some of the skills applied when learning to write, in particular segmenting and spelling. And then lastly, we hope to progress to looking at well-known technique to support early writers as they build up their independence in creating dictated sentences. At the end of the presentation, once the recording is switched off, we will have some time for questions related to writing within phonics lessons. So let's start by considering what is involved in writing. We're just going to pause to consider how many skills you think there are in use at one time when we write this simple sentence. Now, depending on how you choose to group the skills and concepts, you might all have slightly different answers. But what we do know is that writing is complex, and there are multiple strands of knowledge and skill in use at the moment of writing, even a very simple sentence such as this one. When we teach phonics, we often think of it being largely the first of these headings. Excuse me. This model actually brings to life the idea that there are different strands of knowledge and skill that interplay to create a skilled writer. In phonics lessons, we are teaching the basic transcriptional skills needed to say a sentence, form the letters, spell the words, and check it for clarity. These can be seen in the orange box in the bottom left of the image. When we teach phonics, we often think of it being largely the first of these headings, the phonological awareness. But in reality, the foundations of writing, such as letter formation, segmenting, spelling knowledge, and even punctuation begin within these phonics lessons. Whereas these green skills at the top of the diagram related to composition might be a greater teaching focus in other curriculum areas, including your English lesson. In phonics, we want to teach our learners the knowledge and skills to start writing, and then we aim to build automaticity of those skills. Let's consider why we would want to do this. All of us have a finite amount of working memory. Your learners, being younger, have less working memory than you, meaning they can't hold as many concepts in their mind at one time. If a learner, like this image on the left, is using their valuable working memory to process transcriptional skills, like forming letters or segmenting sounds, they won't have much thinking space left to focus on composition, which you can see here on the right. Moving these skills into the long-term memory builds that automaticity we spoke of, freeing up cognitive space for composition skills, such as a form of or vocabulary choices. Now, we know that writing initially has a high cognitive load, so as educators, we should be considering how to gradually build our learners' stamina when writing. We can do this by starting with word-level knowledge and skills. For example, by teaching oral segmenting, GPC knowledge, including letter formation and segmenting with GPCs. The teaching of common exception words also falls into this category. These are core skills you will recognize as the bread and butter activities within phonics lessons, and they embed the knowledge and skills needed to start writing words. When learners are ready, they might progress to supported writing. Now, this is where we give opportunities to model and share the load of writing. In Twinkl Phonics, these activities are built into weekly practice in the weekly workbook activities. This stage is also a good time to embed routines such as self-scaffolding. Activities could include dictated sentences or modeled writing to keep the cognitive load low while starting to apply their word-level skills in a sentence. Finally, your learners start writing with independence. Across phonics lessons, learners also need opportunities to write using the routines, knowledge, and skills within sentences of their own making. In Twinkl Phonics, for instance, there is a dedicated writing lesson every week that offers opportunities for learners to write their own sentences. For example, we might use the writing mini-book to create their own sentences, and in doing so, apply the skills they have developed across the week. Now, we only have a short time together today, and now know that transcriptional skills alone are many and complex. So there are some areas of transcription we will not touch upon today. If you would like more support on formation or oral segmenting skills, please see 2 of our previous TeachMeet events. Once the foundational skills are secured, we come to segmenting with GPCs, the starting point of segmenting to spell. Segmenting with GPCs is a vital prerequisite for writing. This process too can be considered to have a progression, which is outlined in this resource, Twinkl Phonics Subject Leaders Supporting Learners with Segmenting. This resource helps you to understand the various stages your learners might pass through and their needs as they become competent and confident in segmenting. The stages are engaged, where learners are showing interest and readiness to write, including mark making. The high support stage is where we are starting to process with lots of modelling and adult scaffolding to support GPCs and complete the process. The low support stage, where an adult scaffolding might present more challenge and greater independence in segmenting and selecting GPCs. When secure, a learner can segment a word, select the correct GPCs, and sequence them in the right order. And when fluent, a learner will start to show awareness of the process and how changing one GPC might change an entire word. And finally, once fluent, a learner might segment polysyllabic words using syllables to support their segmenting. As their phonics knowledge grows, they begin to make informed GPC choices. So how can you help to move your learners through these stages? Through providing graduated scaffolding to meet their changing needs, high quality teaching and targeted intervention to ensure that learners keep up rather than having to catch up in the future. Let's have a look now at how you can gradually adjust your scaffolding and delivery of segmenting tasks to progress learners through their stages. In the first video, just notice how the adult is modelling the segmenting orally, as well as offering only the GPCs needed. This is to support their learners' cognitive load, but also to create the model of how we segment and spell a word.
Let's segment the word bug. Bug. B-U-G. 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 Bug. Bug.
Fantastic. I really love the use there of the actual visual of having the bug there also to really cement that learning. Now, as learners move to needing lower levels of support, the adult might add a variety of GPCs, including incorrect options, to adjust the level of challenge.
Let's segment the word cat. Cat. K-at. 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 K-at.
Now, as your learners gain confidence, we're just going to give this a moment. Sorry, I do apologise.
Cat.
Forgot that lovely bit at the end as well. Again, beautiful to see it written down as well. Some wonderful transcription skills going on. So as learners gain confidence, allow for more opportunities for self-scaffolding using class resources and familiar routines. Learners will take gradual steps towards segmenting, such as writing the GPC and selecting them from increasingly from memory alone. Now let's talk about spelling as part of early writing. Once learners have an understanding of how to segment and spell the words, they should be guided to notice that some of them, when read and spelt, have exceptions to the GPC rules they have been taught. We use the active repetition method to teach the spelling of common exception words with consistency. We'll take a look at what this looks like in a moment, You might wish to have a look at active repetition method guidance. You can locate this via the QR code and link on this slide. To become confident writers, we need to be taught to spell common exception words, including how to spot and recall the spelling of the part that is the exception to the phonics rule. Within Twinkl Phonics, we have the active repetition method to do this exactly. The main focus is to give learners the skills and identify then learn and recall the tricky part of the word. So how does this actually work? Well, we start by framing the word within a sentence to give it some context. The example here being, we are sitting on the carpet. Then we can identify the tricky part. Oral segmenting can be helpful here to identify which letters make the expected sound and those that do not. For example, saying woo-e helps us to identify the woo sound made and is making the expected sound. But that is the e part of this that is known as the short e. So the long vowel e is the tricky or exception part of the word. Learners then practice writing the word, either highlighting or writing the tricky bit in another colour to help anchor the knowledge of the tricky part. Then we share spellings of the same pattern, which provide other mental links to make sure that retrieving of information is easier at the point of writing. Spelling requires practice within the phonics lesson, and this method then builds in the practice of each word. At Twinkl Phonics, we suggest a learner who is secure in a given level will have word spelling accuracy of 70% for content that they are being taught. If learners need additional support to secure this level of recall, their spelling automaticity or speed of writing, you may wish to consider adding in additional practice time across the day. I'm now going to pass over to Lizzie to take us through the rest of today's presentation.
Thank you, James. So let's finish our thinking about word level writing by considering what we can do to keep the cognitive load low. For instance, you might choose to use phoneme frames to scaffold the spelling of single words, particularly those that require alternative graphemes or where learners are still developing the sequencing of GPCs when they write words. This is a scaffold that can grow with your learners and bridge into Key Stage 2 if needed, as they learn to spell with a wider range of words and knowledge. You could also add to your growing sounds display, which you can see at the bottom of the screen here, with your spelling words, your common exception words and your spelling rules. This provides an anchor point again for learners when spelling at the point of writing, and it reduces the amount of information they need to hold in their working memory when writing words. Now that we've considered some word level writing skills with James, let's look at how we can support writing at a sentence level. Dictation is explicitly recommended throughout the writing framework in the UK, and for good reason. It is an incredibly powerful tool. The framework suggests that dictation should begin as early as the start of reception year. So why is it considered so important? Dictated sentences are a tool, and they're there to manage cognitive load, apply targeted practice, for instance, and as the text is pre-composed by the teacher, dictation removes the cognitive burden of trying to invent a story or generate their own ideas, and this frees up the student's limited working memory to focus entirely on practicing transcription skills, for instance, spelling accurately and forming letters correctly. They feature as a regular activity within Twinkl Phonics lessons, and they come with suggestions to allow you to introduce them and adapt them to meet the needs of your learners. Now, your own role is a very active one at each stage of a dictated sentence activity. Now, there is a plethora of technical language surrounding the stages of dictation, so for ease, we will be talking about dictated sentences in 3 blocks this afternoon. First, the encoding stage. Second, the cognitive priming stage. And finally, the actual transcription process. So let's take a closer look at the steps behind this process. Stage 1 is helping learners to encode and retrieve the spoken sentence. Your role as the educator is really important here to teach the routine and skill of listening to and recalling a sentence which will later be written. We start by saying the premeditated sentence at least 3 times, but let's break this down a little further. So number 1, first, model speaking the sentence clearly whilst your learners listen mindfully and internalize the words in the target caption or your sentence. You may wish to narrate your thought process and help your learners to understand what you, and by extension, what they are meant to be doing at this point. Now, for example, to begin with, you might say something like this. This sentence is one that I need to put in my memory and remember so that I know which words to write down in just a moment's time. So second, once we've narrated that process, next we want to direct learners to repeat the sentence verbally. This could be to you or a partner. Verbally, you want to correct any pronunciation or structural errors now, before we start transcribing. Make sure that you are speaking clearly and at a measured pace yourself. Number 3, then, pupils are directed to count the words in the caption, phrase, or sentence as they repeat it one final time. Now, this routine will help your learners to check if they wrote down all of the words that they intended to. Representing the spoken words in some sort of way supports learners when they come to check their sentences, and it might be written as a number. Or you might represent each word as an underlined space on the page to be filled so that it is visually obvious if words are later on missing. You can do this on the board, on a flip chart, or even on whiteboards and make it work for you. Now then, let's look at this cognitive priming stage. In this stage of the process, we are preparing our learners' brains for writing. So number 4, we can preload or prime their brains to focus on those trickier parts of the sentence, like common exception words and sound patterns that have only recently been learned. This might also include priming them to remember punctuation if you teach year 1 or 2. Step number 5, you want to demonstrate exactly where pupils can check in the classroom environment if they feel uncertain of a particular GPC. So they've got it fresh in their minds that this is the tricky GPC they need, but then they actually need you to explicitly model looking for the word or GPC and narrate your thinking as you're scanning those working walls and displays or sound mats, because this becomes their mental model for what they should be doing when they start dictating the sentence, transcribing the dictated sentence themselves. Now we are, after all of that, finally ready to transcribe or write the actual sentence. So you can see just how much goes on before this stage actually occurs. Depending on your learners, this might be writing out the sentence together, independently, or through guided practice. When modeling this part of the process, remember to read each word back as you write. This encourages checking for errors and correct recall of the sentence. Eventually, your learners will independently write the dictated sentence at this point. Finally, learners need to be guided to read and check their writing. Use the number or the lines that you recorded earlier to check if they recorded all of the spoken words that they intended to. And implement a clear checking procedure to catch common slip-ups and give feedback to encourage in-the-moment learning. So there we have it, dictated sentences in 3 steps. So at Twinkl Phonics, we are teachers, first and foremost, and we understand that many learners will need to build up in confidence, rapid recall, and stamina to complete a full dictated sentence independently. And for this reason, you will notice that the opportunities to practice and apply transcription in the lessons and workbook build up across each level. We start with word level work, like seen down here at the bottom of the screen, and move towards writing captions before learners are asked to independently write dictated sentences. Whatever phonics program you are using, we would encourage the same approach to build your learners' confidence and stamina gradually. We also know that not all learners are ready to write independently straight away, and that's okay. Internalising routines and honing these transcription skills takes time and encouragement and regular practice. And we want to scaffold and then hand over responsibility gradually through structured progression, dissolving those scaffolds as learners secure their skills. So let's look at how you might do some of this. You might start with modelled or shared writing, as we've mentioned. Here, your focus is carrying out the process and narrating your thoughts to teach learners the routine. Gradually, you will ask for their input to complete the task more and more together. Next, move towards partial dictation. Here, learners are only doing some of the transcription. You will model most of the transcription process, but select key parts for learners to attempt on their own. For instance, here you can see on the right of the screen closed captions, and these are where you draw that line where the words should be written. So learners hold the sentence, but transcribe only the words that you select for them to write. A great way to bridge the gap between watching and writing in dictated sentence tasks. And you don't need a pre-printed worksheet either. You can simply model this on the whiteboard or a flip chart or in whatever way works for you and your learners. When they are ready, let learners attempt the full dictated sentence themselves. And eventually, your learners will transcribe their very own sentences. Dictation gives them that targeted practice to build up to that point. And it feels like a big leap for some children, and it's okay. You can always go back to partial dictation again to ease that transition. For instance, you could start a sentence verbally for your learners to transcribe, and they can start to finish it off themselves with their own ideas that they're writing down. Now, finally, we've got to remember that while it starts in the classroom, this writing process, it's applied across the curriculum. These same routines and scaffolds at the point of writing are used in English lessons, science lessons, and any other subject to help apply and embed those important writing skills. So don't be afraid to take everything that you're already doing in phonics to support writing and apply some of those scaffolds to your other areas of the curriculum to help to back up all that you've already done to help them with their writing. So we've talked about dictation, we've talked about word level and independence. What else is there out there to support you? There's a lot to explore on Twinkl related to early writing. For those using Twinkl Phonics, we have a couple of handy locations to point out where you can find materials to support your learners with writing related to their phonics lesson. If you are new to Twinkl Phonics, please do take a look at this guide on screen that will support you when navigating our pages within Twinkl. But for now, let's head over to our Twinkl homepage and have a look at a few of the different activities available to you. Now, we've started here on screen with one of our activity mats, and I wanted to point this out to you before showing you where I found everything. You can see here that the activities included in it are many of the ones that we have already talked about today, giving limited options to begin with to give greater scaffolding, and also leading on towards writing some words themselves. Now, if we go back, thank you for the claps there. If we go back a step, we can see that actually within our supporting resources on our homepage, there are activity mats across multiple levels. Bear with me a moment. Technology is doing its thing. Let's try again. Across multiple levels, there we are, when we click the lesson enhancements down here in the supporting resources. So you can see those same activity mats follow up in their processes for each of these levels 2, 3, and 4. And beyond. When we move up to level 5, for instance, still within lesson enhancements, you'll start to find some different guidance to support with the different elements of writing, such as spelling, grammar, and punctuation. But also, if we continue to have a look, you will find that there are different opportunities to practice, such as dictated sentences. And if we go a little further, we will eventually find some handwriting and formation resources within this section as well. But for now, I'm going to bring us back to our slides so you can have time after this event following the link and exploring at your own leisure. So we are nearly there for today, everybody. Our final bit together. So now that you've started your Twinkl Phonics journey, it's always helpful to connect with other people also using the program. Our Twinkl Phonics school support group is exclusively for those using Twinkl Phonics. So if you are a Twinkl Phonics school and you want to ask more about writing and how other people approach these elements of it, such as spelling or dictated sentences, this is a great place to go. So you can follow the QR code and answer our questions to join our group. But we also do have a lovely event calendar each year of free CPD events, just like the one you've come to today. And that is being populated again for the 26-27 academic year. So please do keep an eye on that and have a look at the events that might help you to build upon what you have learnt with us today.